August 2003. A new concept of interacting with people we knew online was launched, and it was called MySpace. And while it didn't take off straight away, it was what a lot of us had our first experience of social media with. A year later, what was to become Facebook was launched, though most of us didn't arrive on it till about 2008. Instagram arrived in 2010, and about a year later, an app called Peekaboo was born, and that was something to be known later as Snapchat. Why am I saying all this? Well, it's because this means that social media is now over 20 years old. And despite 2 decades of learning about it, using it, and running businesses on it, it seems that we still have no idea how to use it as businesses. And that's mostly because we can't seem to stop trying to sell things on it. And I suppose it's understandable. We grew up with Harvey Norman selling us televisions and mattresses on television. We grew up with catchy jingles selling us soft drinks on radio, and some of us might even just remember picking up a newspaper and seeing more ads than actual news in them. Everything we know about advertising comes from the advertising that we saw growing up. That's until we learned to ignore it. And thus began the downfall of traditional media as the internet taught us that we can block ads or somehow pay to avoid them. Which gets me to thinking, why do we hate ads so much? They are the backbone of the modern media and the internet, and they're the whole reason why social media even exists. So if no one bought ads, then these platforms wouldn't exist as they go broke within a year. But have you ever considered that if no one acted on the ads, no one would buy them? The confusing fact about advertising online is that we universally hate these ads, but they seem to work. Because if they didn't, no one would advertise. So why do we hate ads but still allow them to somehow guide our purchasing decisions? Because clearly we are, because people keep buying ads. A few years ago, Meta commissioned Nielsen to conduct a massive consumer survey to find out what it was about ads that made them work. Amongst the many findings was the one thing that made any kind of online content appear as premium to the viewer, and that was relevance. People overwhelmingly listed relevance to them as the number one reason why something would seem premium to them. And it was that premium nature that could turn an ad from an annoyance to something compelling enough to respond positively to. And it makes sense. It is important to make sure that the message appeals and so is relevant to your target audience. Otherwise, you will become yet another speed hump on someone's way to the content that they actually want to see. An Infogroup study showed that 90% of consumers find it annoying to receive messages not personally relevant to them. Do you really want to annoy 90% of your audience? So how do you make what you're presenting as relevant as possible to your audience? Address a common problem that most of your audience experiences. Those who don't have that problem will drop off, and that's completely okay, but that's because they're not your customer anyway. But because you're being relevant to most of them, the ones that matter will stick around. Then mention something you notice that most of your audience would either be entertained by or be curious about. Again, some people will be annoyed by it, but it won't be 90% of them. Or you could be funny. You'd be surprised by just how many people leverage their sense of humor to get attention online and then continue to keep that attention. Humor is like a lighthouse in a very stormy world. Sure, not everyone is going to like you, but then do you really want to work with those who don't like you? There is always going to be 1,000 things you want to say about yourself or about your business or your products or your services, and your potential customer doesn't want to hear any of it because absolutely no one goes onto social media to be advertised to. Be relevant so you can be premium and finally be successful online. I'm Dante St. James.